Exercise Confidence followers, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode today. In this one, I get to sit down with Nick Manzano. Nick and I actually go way back. We met in elementary school. I've been fortunate enough to see Nick's confidence journey unfold, but in this episode, I actually got to learn a lot more details about why he is the way that he is in terms of his own confidence, and how the way his journey unfolded allowed him to make decisions that aided in his confidence. Nick attributes a lot of who he is to the family that he has, especially his mom. Nick currently works in marketing in Los Angeles, California, and he was generous enough to share his time and his story with us. So, without further ado, let's dive into this episode of Exercise Confidence with Nick Manzano. Hey, Exercise Confidence listeners, today I am here with Nick Manzano. Nick, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to talk to you. I've actually, a little backstory, known Nick for most of my life. Went to elementary school together. Nick, I want you to tell the listeners whatever you'd like to tell them about yourself in 20 seconds or so.
Cool. I was raised by a single mother. I think that contributes to a lot of who I am today. I went to school with you, so that was pretty cool, being able to say that. And then I went to Cal State Fullerton for undergrad, went to Texas Christian University for grad school, and currently work in marketing advertising for a big beer company.
Nice. All right. So we'll dive into my favorite first question, which is, have you always been a confident individual?
Loaded question, but I would say at varying times it's changed, but I would say largely the answer is yes. I think that it's kind of rooted in, as I mentioned, just having like a strong single mother, kind of raising myself as well as my sister, and like the actual belief that, like she said, you could be whatever you want to be, and it was just always that kind of being reinstated every single time. So I think that contributes a lot to like why I think that I can accomplish a lot of tasks.
You've mentioned your mom twice already, and we've just started. What about her would you say influenced you the most?
A lot of things, but I would say that paramount above all, it would be just kind of like her tenacity and drive, knowing that she kind of only had herself to rely on to make sure that like my older sister and I were always taken care of. She was always forced to make a decision, the best decision possible with the facts that she had at hand. So it was always just being able to, make the decision, commit to the decision, and then, see it through all the way. So definitely like the determination and drive is something that I've always admired, and I would say that that's kind of like what I hold on a pedestal for her.
Growing up with a single mom, I know from many friends and family members, is no easy feat for either children or the mom. And you actually came to our school, like you didn't start with all of us in kindergarten, you came over a little bit later. So starting second grade? So, yeah, second grade. So starting in a new environment like that, what was that like for you? Because I remember you coming in and just being like unapologetically Nick. And so that's why when I was thinking about people to interview, I'm like, oh my gosh, Nick's always been confident. So like as a child,
Yeah, definitely. Like, well, coming in from second grade, so to take a step back and like the schooling that I had, so I had gone to an elementary or school prior that was like a magnet school, and it was great and everything, but I think my mom had always kind of had aspirations of making sure that my sister and I both had the best education possible. So it was sending us to private schools for the education, maybe not necessarily the religious aspect, knowing that my mom has never been the most religious. My family, although does come from a Catholic background from like my grandmother's side, so she sent me mostly for like the for the educational aspect. So then going from where I was and having the friends that I had established there, then moving on to second grade at a new school with new people, it was just kind of easy because everyone was friendly. When people are friendly and open, it makes conversation a lot easier. And from what I can recall loosely, my my bonding concept with most people was basketball. Recess, we'd all be able to go on the courts. We'd play basketball and sports. So through that, we were able to always forge friendships. And you were always one of the first picks, like playing basketball wise. So, that was always easy to mix it up. And then we had like all the rest of the cast that came onto the team, which always made it fun. So I would say through sports specifically is what always made things relatable.
Do you think there is anything unique to sports that opens a door for someone to allow their confidence to grow should they choose to walk through that door?
Yeah, I would say that, just the camaraderie between peers, a lot of that, it like teaches you to not only support someone else in their endeavors and like pump them up to get them to be the best they can be, but it also kind of works in the reciprocal where they're doing the same for you. So kind of that teamwork that pushes everyone to the newest heights, I would say is really good for building confidence specifically. And then also like be good and take care of the craft and work to get better at it, then I think that also contributes to the confidence that you exude while playing because you put in the hours previously, or if you're part of an intramural league and you guys have practices, then you're able to just continually build upon the foundation that you've already established, and therefore kind of just making you, more vocal or being able to speak out with confidence.
Teamwork being a building block to building confidence, do you have like a moment that you can recall, whether it was, as a kid or older in your professional life or even with your family, where you really remember like that sort of teamwork in action that allowed you to feel really self-confident in the moment?
I'm sure there's a couple of examples that I can point back to that would take like a tremendous amount of pondering, but for the sake of the ease and what came to mind also kind of it's part of what we had done while we were in elementary school. And so you remember the ropes course that we had done, I think in 6th grade, where we had gone to camp and we had to do all of that. So I remember not necessarily being afraid of heights, but there were like 2 different totem poles that you had to climb, and you jump out and reach for a trapeze and try to grab it, and that was part of it. And I remember being petrified when I got to the top, and I like my knees were buckling, and I remember everybody kind of shouting, and everyone did it for each other, where they were like, "You could do it! Like, do it! You got this!" And I missed the mark. I didn't touch the trapeze. I think I just jumped just to get off, but it was like that moment where there was, the love of people that are supporting you, kind of shouting out the positive vibes at you, where you start to believe, I had doubts, but those doubts are slowly diminishing because of the positivity radiating from everybody around. So I'd say that that's one moment that I can think of just kind of based off of like our elementary school chatter that comes to mind.
Yeah, for sure. I actually think the only kid that caught the mark was Ryan Lafotu, who was already 6 feet tall in 6th grade. Yeah.
Yeah,
so like,
he was already tall.
It wasn't fair for the rest of us who weren't even 5 foot yet. But actually, that obstacle course, or that specific ropes one that you're talking about where you climb the totem and jump, is called the Leap of Faith, which is like a fantastic segue, because has there been a time in your life where you really had to take a big leap of faith when it came to believing in yourself and betting on you?
Yeah, when I was at Cal State Fullerton, I ran for like IFC president while I was there, and I had done some other stuff. Like, for anyone that's listening, it's the IFC is the Interfraternity Council. It's kind of like a student-run government for like fraternities and sororities on campus. And while I was there, I did a couple of positions, and then I just said, I'm going to run for president, because the person that was there was like kind of advocating the position. So I just went for it, and I didn't prepare a speech. I went up and I just wing it and say a bunch of stuff that sounds good, but I meant it, because I had served some time in role, and by doing that, I was able to at least establish things that were important and that would get people mobilized to potentially vote. And so I, went up, did it, and then the next day, like, we had the vote, and then came back and found that I won. And I remember getting in my car afterward and like driving and having some music on, like there was something that was like pumping me up, and I like screamed at the top of my lungs, like just like in that moment, I felt that like everything that I had done up to a point was always kind of like, all right, well, I'm doing it. Like, I'm just doing it to do it. But then doing it and then succeeding was different, where it's not that I never succeeded before, but it was also to have some sort of accolade where I was nominated by peers. So I think that also kind of just pushed the confidence level up a notch, where it was like, all right, now not only am I taking notice of the things that I can do, other people are believing in the stuff that I'm saying. So it just kind of added to that feeling that I got after like that euphoria. So I would say that was probably one of the moments that I can think of.
Yeah, for sure. That would definitely be one of those great moments where you just bet on yourself and it really pays off. I know that for the listeners, you will have those moments where you absolutely bet on yourself and it does pay off. But you're also going to have moments where maybe you take that leap of faith and you fall flat on your face. But that's okay. You got to get back up and you got to keep going, because success doesn't happen overnight. And I wanted to ask you about that, because I like keeping the interviews really personal. So personally, like, how would you define success for yourself and in your own life?
Success for me is probably a lot to do with family. I would say for the most part, where being able to keep familial ties and make sure that everyone's healthy and happy. So to me, it's like if my family's doing okay, then I feel like for the most part I'm also okay. There's not a lot that kind of just personally like impacts me. Also, kind of like my well-being is also tied to just am I happy? A question that I ask myself every day. But there's moments that'll pass where I'm like, I don't feel the same that I normally do. I take kind of like an inventory of myself and see what might be lacking, and then adjust from there on kind of like my day-to-day schedule. Whether maybe I'm overburdening myself with work, maybe that kind of contributes to me feeling a little down. So then it's like, all right, I'll shut down a little early the next day and then, do something else. So I would say that overall kind of like success and happiness are kind of tied. There's a one-to-one correlation for me on those. And then outside of that, just getting an attaboy or an attagirl every once in a while is always nice. Like, I don't need it, but when you hear it, it's always like, yeah, I forgot. That is very encouraging. So I would say that success overall is just kind of defined by my family's happiness and also just a couple of good jobs.
I think that's the most selfless way I've ever heard it put, actually, because a lot of times success can be tied very like intrinsically to like us and what we do in our own like outcomes of what we're working toward. And so to have it be right off the bat associated with family is a really interesting and unique perspective that I like. And I know somebody out there that hears this is really going to be able to resonate with them, because maybe they're not a self-driven person, but they're driven by the people that they surround themselves with. So thanks for sharing that. Okay, I want to set up a picture here and ask you a question about it, because you win this IFC Prez, you're at Cal State Fullerton, which, knowing you were born and raised here in California, and then you graduate and you go to Texas, and you just said that you're a big family guy. What was that like for you, going somewhere completely brand new once again, but this time without the family being just a drive away?
Yeah, great question, and one that I still have grappled with in retrospect. So kind of give you the lay of the land on how it all happened was after I finished Cal State Fullerton, I got a full ride to TCU.
Oh, wow.
I applied to a couple of places, and they were all like good establishments, but the reason why TCU was on my radar was because my stepdad had worked for Toyota at the time, and they were moving their headquarters to Plano, which is like North Dallas. And in Fort Worth in Dallas, or essentially the geographic equivalent of Los Angeles, Orange County. Like, I would say that they're about equidistant. And so TCU was on my map. They also were slated to do very well in football. And since Cal State Fullerton didn't have a football team, I felt somewhat slighted that I didn't have the tailgate experience.
For sure.
So when I got into TCU, I said, yes, I'm accepting it, not only because it's free now, but also because I get to do this tailgating experience. So I move out there, I get an apartment sight unseen other than just kind of like photos that I saw online. And I move in, and one of my best friends, Nick, who's also named Nick, he came kind of cross halfway cross country with me in a U-Haul that was like loaded up, and I had a car carrier in the back with my car on it. So we did just kind of a tandem road trip. And so we get there, and he's there for a week. We're just hanging out together, and then he leaves. I know no one there. Like, school starts in another week, and it's just me, myself, and I. And then shortly thereafter, I find out that my parents are no longer moving because my sister announced that she's pregnant with who is going to be my nephew eventually. And so they end up reevaluating their situation. So I'm in Texas, my family's no longer coming out, and I start school. But as was similar with the situation with elementary school, I just made friends with the people that were there. We all come from like kind of different walks of life. We're from different states, different countries, and had like different affinities towards school and education. Some people seem destined to be on the track to be like a PhD. I've always just been one of those people that just kind of dabbles in, gives their effort, and their effort was always good enough to be able to get them by.
Right.
Grad school was a different test to that. So I had to put a lot more effort in than what I was used to, because normally my bare minimum was good, and now my bare minimum was okay, and I wanted to be good, if not great. So then having to put in a lot more of the time, then my kind of personal life felt like it was going into a whirlwind, so to speak, just because I didn't have as much control over it, because all of it was devoted to school, and then I was also working full time. So the absence of family there definitely kind of depleted a lot of what I would say was like my natural jubilance, and then I had to find it some other way, and I ended up kind of pivoting toward like fitness. And so I started to get really into fitness while I was there, because it was something that I could definitely control. And once I felt that I had control of it better gradually, I mean, grad school was tough all in all. Like, I would say that it was a very trying experience, and that was probably some of the most adversity I've faced. But overall, I would say that going to Texas just abruptly from California, not even to talk about the culture change from California to Texas, was huge.
I think it's interesting that you turned to fitness during this time, because that is something that I wound up doing after an incident in my life where I really needed an outlet for some of my anxieties, and it helped me get better in touch with myself. But the tagline for the podcast is that confidence is like a muscle, and you have to exercise it and stretch it if you want to grow it, much like with our bodies. So this fitness journey for you, what was that like? Are you somebody that was kind of, I know you mentioned like you were a basketball player like when we were younger, but did you stick with the fitness like throughout when you were in high school and in undergrad, or like was this kind of a brand new uncharted territory for you taking on this fitness journey in grad school?
In high school, I mean, we did like gym classes and stuff. Like, it was never as serious as most people could possibly be. I was always involved in organized sports, so naturally, like, conditioning was part of it. So I was always just fit. Like, I was never a ripped six-pack guy or the most jacked guy walking around, but was always able to kind of keep up and do what I needed to. And then going into undergrad, I was in fraternity as well, so I had some extracurriculars. I worked while I was in undergrad, and then I think it was maybe like my junior year of undergrad, so like 2014-ish, around then, 2013, 2014, I started doing Insanity. So it's kind of like P90X, kind of like a lot of body weight hit, like cardio. Yeah. And so I started doing that, and I did it for the 60 days and lost a bunch of weight, like thinned down. I felt a lot better when I was at the lower weight because of like what my lifestyle was, and then now like eating right and making sure I was working out daily, like all of those endorphins kind of kick in, and then you feel better about yourself. Like then, relating to more, and I would say better, I was more confident in myself. And then, so I did that, and then I did it on and off for a while, like throughout that. And then once I got into grad school, it was probably halfway through my first year when I was like, I need to do something. Like, I feel like shit. And so then I ended up going to the gym, and this was like my first time like actually doing like workouts in the gym. I talked to a friend who used to be kind of a personal trainer. He put together like a 4-month program for me, and I followed that religiously, was dieting and doing all of the stuff, and got in very, very good shape over like those 4 months that I had done it. And then I would take tolerance breaks every once in a while as I continued. And that was kind of like my fitness journey there. And then once I finished kind of grad school, or actually then in my final year of grad school, Nick, the one that I mentioned, who road tripped with me, he then moved out to Texas and moved into my extra bedroom. So then now I had somebody, or I had already established friends because I'd been through grad school and like met people here and there. And then through work, I friend group, but then my best friend comes to town. And then I was like, all right, like things are clicking on all cylinders here now. And so then I got him into the whole fitness thing, and then I trained with him, and he had a lot of fitness goals too. And we were able to kind of get him there. So it was almost infectious. Like once you have something, he started feeling better kind of out of everything that he was doing. Kind of like dating life as well started to flourish just because we were both like pretty confident in everything we were doing. So I would say that those were all definitely some positives. And one other thing that I'll mention as well, that's kind of a tangent of at least working out, was when I first came out there, one thing that I had to be very comfortable with quickly was being by myself and kind of like solitude. And although I've always been able to, watch movies and that's a passion that I've had, or like listen to music or play the guitar shoddily and sing along to it, like being able to do all those things, one thing that I really missed was going to movie theaters. And I remember growing up, I always just think it was weird when there was just one person in the movie theater by themselves watching a movie. I'm like, what's that weirdo doing? Like, why would you go to a movie by yourself? You could just watch a movie at home. And I realized that was something that I missed. And so there was one day I said, I'm going to take myself out on a date. I'm going to go eat by myself at a booth by myself or whatever. I'm going to go to a movie. I'm going to go get myself some ice cream, whatever, or what have you. And I did all of those things. And afterwards, I thought, wow, that was really, really cool. And to this day, I mean, obviously pandemic removed since movies have been closed, I enjoy going to movies by myself. I'll do it like pretty religiously. I'll go with people too, but yeah. I'm now being on my own and doing things by myself, like to think that there's any stigma around it.
So I have a couple like fast questions to ask off of things that you said there. So first one is, what did you get your graduate degree in at TSU or TCU?
TCU, yeah. I got it in advertising, PR, and marketing.
Oh, perfect. All right. And you're still in marketing, so that's wonderful. And then what was the first movie you saw by yourself?
Ooh, good question. What was it? I want to say that it was... good question. I don't remember what movie it was. You think that I would?
Yeah, it would. I mean, not so much the same thought of like, oh, weirdo at themselves by the movies, because maybe I just didn't ever recognize it. I feel like I didn't see a lot of people going to the movies by themselves growing up. But I do remember the first time I went to a movie by myself, and ironically, the movie I saw was Blue Jasmine. It was like a Cate Blanchett movie. It's this woman who's like in the middle of like some life crisis, and it was just very much a reflection of my own life at the time, and I felt blue. My name is Jasmine. I was like, yeah, this is just perfect. So that was a fun little memory to take down there. But the other thing I wanted to talk about, because two things you mentioned were the confidence you gained during this whole fitness journey, the first time when you were doing your whole like P90X insanity stuff, but then also when you were more like in a gym with that sort of fitness setting, and the fact of how you navigated that time alone. Because I know a lot of us have spent this past year alone, and we are seeing hope and a light at the end of the tunnel now, but I still think that there are inevitabilities that people will face those times of being alone, and in that aloneness, facing the loneliness of it. So how did that time of really being alone, living on your own somewhere you hadn't met people, affect you and your self-growth?
Yeah, I would say that a lot of it kind of just came from being okay with like silence and really kind of genuflecting or like reflecting on what it was that I was doing, and like who I was, who I wanted to be, what I was looking for in a significant other. A lot of those questions kind of I posed to myself, and intermittently throughout, like dating apps exist, so like I was on some of those, met some people where you have the trial and error of figuring out what you do and you don't want, and it was a lot of me coming to terms with, all right, you're on a path toward something like your career, and along the way you're also going to encounter people that are going to become more and more meaningful to you. So figure out what you want and don't waste their time and don't waste your own. And so a lot of that was just kind of me doing always like a cost benefit analysis of what it was that I was doing and was it worth the investment. So I would say that that's a lot of what I had learned, is to kind of just take that mental inventory on things that you have going on and then decide whether or not it's worth keeping or worth getting rid of. Almost kind of like a Marie Kondo thing before Marie Kondo was around. So I would say that that's probably like what I learned in kind of being alone, and which served me well now, because I live on my own. Like I have my own apartment, and so like during quarantine and the pandemic and everything, it was a lot of just kind of being on my own here. Obviously, I have friends that I can FaceTime and I can message and stuff, and I do that here and there. I'll jump online and play like a Call of Duty with a buddy somewhere, right, and we'll be able to connect that way. But largely, it's just being okay with solitude.
And then in that solitude, were you allowed this fitness journey of yours to bud? And you did mention the confidence aspect of it. At least personally for you, I'm not asking you to answer the universe's question, but why do you think fitness aids in people's self-confidence?
Not that I'm qualified to speak on science of all means, but I know that there's a lot of chemical kicks that you get because of like all of like the good vibes and chemicals that are released in your own body as you're working out, like the sense of euphoria and tied to like endorphins and things of the sort. So I would say that from like a chemical perspective, there's a reason, but then just from like a non-scientific perspective, it's just looking at like I feel like I look good, so then that confidence is going to carry into the things that I'm doing every day, because I, once again, kind of going back to that ideology that I'd mentioned back in like why sports is important. It's because you put in the work and then you reap the rewards of it, of that work, and what you put into it. So you're just kind of confident in who you are. And I felt like I was just kind of walking around with like a natural swagger, because I knew like I put in the work in the off time. Like I felt good, like I looked good. I was at the top of my game, so to speak. Like not really. I've always just been kind of in my mind. I was there, and so like my confidence, I felt was definitely. Was definitely improved because of the working out.
Putting in the work and reaping the rewards. Take a moment here and think about it. Of the things in your life that you have put the work in for, and the rewards that you have the rewards you have reaped. Tongue twister. What is your favorite one, or which one means the most to you, stands out the most?
I would say, I guess it would have to be kind of career-wise. Like when I came out of grad school, like I'll be honest, there was a shot to my ego after getting out, knowing that I had 2 bachelor's degrees and having a master's degree, and then thinking like, well, I deserve this job. When realistically, it's like everybody's trying to compete to be able to be at like an entry-level position, mm-hmm. and you have to work your way up. So if you come in with an ego and an expectation that you're already that you deserve this, then you set yourself up for kind of like a rude awakening. And that was kind of the course that I found myself on, was thinking I deserved something, that I was entitled to something. And I think that there's something to be said about kind of the mentality of like millennials, and I'm in that group, and I was there. Yeah. There is a true thing about like millennials being entitled, and I would say kind of the double-edged swords is, although my mom pushed me to say that I could be anything I wanted, I believed that like I could be anything I wanted and I deserved everything. And so then trying to apply for these jobs, realizing that I didn't have all of the experience, although I had part of the schooling, I was going to have to start at like at the base and then work my way up. So then getting an entry-level job in radio, and then being able to like work my butt off to be able to make sure that people took notice at all of the work that I was doing. So never saying no to saying no if it was anything that was morally conflicting, but I was never put to the test on anything like that. It was just always saying yes, I can complete a task when you need to have it done. Like try to always do what my most diligent work was, and then getting promoted after a couple of months. Then I got promoted again after that, and then after like I had done that for a bit, people wanted me to work on the projects that they were on because they knew that the end result was going to be one that they find favorable. And so working in radio and sales and project management and like doing all the activation stuff for like large clients, that was what I had done. And then one of the clients that I was working with took notice of that, and then they brought me on, and so that's where I find myself now, within the beer industry. So it's always just making sure that you're doing good work on all of those things. So I think it was a ripple effect. But to answer the original question, I think just career wise, that was something that I was able to really put in the work on and then see the results, because I've been able to move in my career, I would say, at a pretty steady pace within kind of the last like four-ish years. So once I had completed grad school and went in and, put all of it into trying to just kind of climb the corporate ladder, and still am doing it. It's always kind of an active job.
Did you move back to California once you graduated grad school?
Yes, I did. There was a quick second where I thought maybe I would stay in Texas, but then after thinking about it and kind of going back to the whole family bit, my sister had already given birth to my nephew, and I wanted to be back there. I also had another nephew who was sick with leukemia, and so I wanted to be here for that as well. And so just knowing that my whole family nucleus is here, packed bags, came back.
Going back to your answer about reaping the reward and putting in the work, I like that your answer was something that took like a chunk and a length of time, right? Because like you said, especially as millennials, we're like the microwave generation. We're so used to getting instant gratification, whether it's like a like on a picture or an instant response in a DM or an email or something. So having to be humbled in that way is never fun, but I think it's always necessary. And sometimes when facing hard things like that, people will turn to different things, whether it's like reading or counselors or a mentor. Did you have anyone or anything like that kind of helped keep you like centered while you were on this new career path, like newly out of grad school, really full-fledged in the workforce, that was allowing you to like recenter as you were going through this journey?
Any like one person, I would say it was more of kind of like an amalgamation of all of the people that I had worked with, where if I had questions, they always made themselves available or presentable, so they were never in any way not approachable. I would be able to go to them with whatever question it was. I had one boss named Claire who I worked with back in radio, and she was just a badass. Like she knew everything, it felt like, and I would be able to talk to her about all of it. And at one point, the position that I was in faced kind of like a fork in the road, and it was either, hey, you need to move to New York for this position. Ooh. It's not going to necessarily be like any type of like salary bump or anything, but like the position's moving to be here, so you have that option, or you can do something else. And so it was like, well, I really like this job, and other people had been approaching her on the side that I was unaware of to ask if I can join their teams internal to the company. And so she had told me kind of like, well, as your boss, this is what I say, but as kind of just like a peer and someone that works with you, this is what I think, and as a friend, this is what I think. So it was like being able to see three sides of the story and see how each of those paths would kind of tie me back career-wise to where I wanted to be. So it's just having a very curt conversation on what do I expect out of my career, and now which of these paths line up with that, because she wouldn't tell me what to do. Sometimes it's always nice to just be told.
Oh, yeah.
Because it abdicates you of having to put in the thought. Mm-hmm. But she would just say, these are the paths as I see them. Now you go home and do the work on like, what do you want out of this? And so after some thought, I ended up accepting one of the roles that was more local, that kept me in Los Angeles. And she advocate, and still to this day, like, we'll exchange messages here and there on LinkedIn just to check in on how everybody's doing. But I would say that she was always she was somebody that I would say was a mentor, and I've had many of those along the way where I've just been able to kind of ask, and sometimes friends are even mentors in the sense where I can just always go to them, ask them a question, and they'll give me an honest answer.
Mentorship is really interesting to me because I've mentioned it in like a past episode or two. Like, when I heard what, like, you need a mentor, and I was like, no, that's like crap. Like, I don't want somebody telling me what to do. Mainly that's the reason why I didn't want a mentor. I don't like when people tell me what to do. It's a part of my personality that I work on daily. But honestly, like, having somebody that pours into your life, that cares enough, like your boss did, to show you all the sides, to give you a glimpse into, here's what door number 1, 2, and 3 can look like. You have to choose which one you're going to open. I think that's powerful, and I think that's really awesome that you had somebody like that. And again, with who is in your life, how important do you think it is to be selective about the people that you surround yourself with, especially if you are trying to be self-confident in whatever it is you're dealing with in life?
I would say that it's important. But I mean, there are different friendships for different people, and they're able to handle kind of like varying roles in those. So I know people that can be very negative and doubting in themselves, and that. Not that that's a bad characteristic, but to me it was like I've always never been. I have been negative. I would be lying if I didn't say that. But I've always been able to kind of talk myself out of the negativity and then get back on track. Or I have people that I've surrounded myself with that do that. So like I feel like confidence. I forget. There's this saying that I've always heard, and I'm gonna say some derivative of it, but I would just say that kind of like whoever you are and like what you kind of exude, you'll get back in return to some degree. And so like a confident person can find confident people because they're the outgoing ones, they're the boisterous ones. Although there are times where it's a facade, where like I haven't felt like I'm truly meant to be shoulder to shoulder with the people that are in the group that I'm in, but being able to just at least speak in a way that like is able to accurately convey what I'm thinking makes me feel a lot better because I can handle myself in those social situations. But I would say in terms of the people that I'm surrounded by, I often have like-minded friends. There are a couple that I can think of that you may not be as confident, but I'm always there as kind of like a fallback for them, where it's like, hey, if you're ever down on yourself, talk to me. And like, but like talk it through. Like I'm a sounding board, and that's what I always like to say. But I would say that to answer your question just straightforward, it's very important who you surround yourself with.
In addition to who you surround yourself with, and as somebody who has experienced solitude, so to speak, when you were moving to a new place and living on your own, and as you do now living on your own, do you think that it is worth it for someone to remove themselves from those situations when somebody isn't pouring into them that positivity and utilizing that solitude or utilizing that removal for their own best interest?
There's people that can compartmentalize things where like it doesn't bother them if they're not getting a desired result. And for those people, that's great. Like I would say that oftentimes I'm that type of person where it's like, this might be a negative situation, but it's temporary. Like I'm totally fine with this. But if it were constant and I were to feel beat down and tired, then remove yourself from the situation. Like absolutely. There's no reason why you should subject yourself voluntarily to something that makes you feel less than who you really are or who you like being. And so I would say absolutely remove yourself. But at the same time, if you're trying to prove something to yourself that you can do this, then go ahead and put yourself through the ringer. You just need to be cognizant of like the minute that you feel like you're losing who you are and who you like to be, then get out of the situation.
A lot of times, as you had mentioned, we like decisions to be made for us, but when it requires us to take that action, it can be a little difficult. And so again, touching on that like solitude that you faced and finding these things out about yourself, one of the things that I have always just loved and admired about you is obviously how you put yourself out there, but especially in regards to when you post videos of you singing and playing guitar. How did you find or create the confidence to just put it up? Because I love singing and I love playing music, but I don't think I've ever posted videos of me doing it because I'm always nervous.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely nerve-wracking, and like the times that I've performed in person for people, like at like coffee houses or whatever, like it was like I still have butterflies on that. When it's just me and the video camera, like or me and my phone, it's a little bit different because it's just like I'm not performing to any audience. Like it's all very much like removed, and I think that we could probably get into like a social discussion on like the taboos of that and like being very personal. But overall, I would say though, like it kind of harkens back to like my whole family thing. I remember when I was younger, I had an aunt and like, oh, you're such a good singer, like sing for me. My mom would call me her jukebox, and like I would just sing in the car, I would sing in the shower, like I would just do the singing thing. And then because it was something that I enjoyed, I remember doing choir, or the praise band, and doing all that kind of stuff, and then talent shows. But it was because people never said that I was bad or that I should stop that I kind of kept going. And then I would say that at this point, like, when I don't do them as often anymore, on occasion I will, but when I do some of the videos, I'll be honest, and I would say that some of it is attention seeking. Like, it's not like at all like just to be like, I'm doing it to make people happy. Like, I'd be such a liar. But it's like attention seeking, where it's like, I've always been told that I have some sort of talent, and like, the talent on the scale is varying. Like, people could think that I'm bad, and some people could think that I'm not. But it's just something that I've liked doing. I like putting it out there. I do like receiving, like, seeing the likes and or like hearing the praise, or like somebody sliding into my DMs saying, hey, you should do a cover of this song, or like maybe we should do like a duet or a duo. Like, those are always kind of cool things that, always come back to the front of my mind, where I've never had a bad experience where somebody was like, you are horrible, you're trash, like, you should stop doing this. Like, no one's ever done that, because I feel like, because sometimes social media polices itself, like, the people that are going to be negative just aren't going to like it, or they'll block you. One of the two.
Oh man, I just love and appreciate the honesty on that, of like, sometimes it's attention seeking, because of my own honesty. Like, yeah, for the most part, like, that is what my social media page is sometimes. Not that it's like I need validation in any way, but like, I love posting a picture and seeing all my girlfriends hyping me up. Like, yeah, that's our girl. Or like fire emojis, or like the heart eye emojis, or just my friends liking it. I'm like, hell yeah. Like, it definitely gives me one of those like chemical reactions, a little endorphin boost. And I'm like, this is great. Like, I feel so good about myself. It's a confidence boost, because then I go about the rest of the day like, I do not look anything like that picture right now, because I took that Saturday when I was dressed up, and today I'm Monday in sweats working from home, but I feel good working at home in these sweats. So yeah, I appreciate that. And throughout this conversation, like, what you present and how you speak of yourself is very self-aware. And I think being self-aware is also a very important thing, in addition to being able to grow your self-confidence, because you just got to be honest with yourself. Has that self-awareness and that self-honesty been something that has just been there with you your whole life, or is that something you've had to work on?
Definitely have had to work on it. And I couldn't point to like a single point of like, this is where I became self-aware, like, not like a weird Terminator movie. Right. But I would say that probably a lot of it came around the time I was in grad school, because with all of that alone time, it's like, you can really figure out what's messed up about yourself. And so, and through trial and error with like relationships and friendships and everything under the sun, it's a lot about learning about who I am at the end of the day. And so if I can look at myself in the mirror and say, like, this is something you need to work on, or like, I've always been kind of rude, at least even in relationships that have been successful, I can at least recognize when I've screwed up. And that's something, I've not always been somebody that can apologize, but I've gotten a lot better at it as I've gotten older, because it's also like, there's the difference between like being confident in like making sure like, oh, I definitely did my due diligence on this, but then there's also being conceited and they're having an ego. And it's like, sometimes you need to put those two things aside to be able to recognize like, hey, I am not doing something that is good, or that's, that behooves the relationship in any way, or whatever the situation might be. So just making sure that I'm kind of bettering that. So, I mean, I've always been one to like, and I like self-deprecating humor, so I can always kind of frame it in a way that, pokes fun at what the reality of the situation is. And like, that's kind of my way of like showing like my fault and like my humility, is by kind of making jokes at my own expense, because it's like, I know where my like little picadillos are, and so like no one can push my buttons like I can push my buttons. So it's just either I use it as a way to push myself forward, but overall,
I've seen it in myself, and obviously in friends, as like everybody grows up. Some people get comfortable with getting honest with themselves, and you see the benefits of that, and it's great to see people mature in that way, and how their self-growth journey is so beautiful. And sometimes you're looking at your friend like, dude, just stop lying to yourself. Like, there's no sense in faking it here. But in addition to kind of like your own self-talk and self-awareness, what is the best outside advice you've ever gotten that you keep with you to this day, if any?
This phrase, "this too shall pass," that for me has been something that actually my mom told me when I was younger, and I used to be so annoyed by it. And like, what do you mean? Like, it felt like every moment that was ever stated in was always going to be the end all be all. Like, this was going to define my life.
Mm-hmm.
But, now at 28, I've made it through all of those moments. And I've told friends that before. And it's now one of those things that's always just etched into my mind of like, might be, it's going to get better, or maybe it may not get better immediately, but there's going to be some sort of change, and then a clearing is going to appear, and you're going to be able to, pick yourself up or figure something out. And so, that's the quote, is "this too shall pass."
I love that. That's a great one. And for the listeners, that's a great thing to remember on days when maybe you don't feel like your confidence journey or your self-growth journey is going where or as fast as you want. Because every day is not a highlight reel. Some days you feel like you're on the cutting room floor, and that's okay, because that's just the reality of life and the way things work. So don't beat yourself up over things that don't necessarily go your way, especially on the first try or as quickly as you want, because as Nick said, this too shall pass. So Nick, we'll start wrapping it up here, and I'll ask you my favorite last question to ask my guests, which is, if you could give our listeners one piece of advice to exercise confidence every day in themselves, what would it be?
Do something you're uncomfortable with. Maybe it's once a month. It doesn't matter what the cadence is, but if you can put yourself in a situation where you're not typically comfortable, then you're doing something to push your boundaries. And by pushing your boundaries, you're effectively kind of making yourself more confident in areas you were unstable in.
That's a great piece of advice. I love that one, especially I feel like this last year has really forced a lot of people to be uncomfortable in different situations, whether it was, transitioning with their work or having to stay home more often. But I think that there is absolutely a beautiful opportunity in doing something that you're uncomfortable with, because I know we see it time and time again. So thank you, Nick, so much. I just appreciate this time we got to share, and I appreciate you sharing your story. I say this all the time because I truly believe it. I know something you said is going to resonate really personally with somebody that listens, so I appreciate your time very much.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate being here.
Listeners, what a beautiful last piece of advice we were given in today's episode. I love the sentiment that this too shall pass. It is such a beautiful phrase that reminds us that what we may be going through, though it may seem all-consuming or overwhelming, is momentary and just temporary. I hope you can cling to that with anything that you may be encountering right now. I know a lot of us have felt like that sentiment maybe is a lie this past year, as we are continually waiting for life to return back to normal, or maybe it's a different mountain you're facing in your own personal life. But whatever it is, I hope that you're able to exercise confidence in some of what Nick shared with us and his own journey, story, and decisions that he made to pursue his own path confidently, and to always remind himself that this too shall pass. Tune in next week as I sit down with Tally Goody. Tally is an attorney, and she shares her story as a woman in the legal industry and how she was able to cultivate confidence in herself and open her own law firm. Tally is such a pleasure to speak with, and I know she is going to be a pleasure to listen to. She's so warm-hearted, so generous, and such an incredible resource and mentor. I'm super excited to share her episode, so please tune in next week on Exercise Confidence as we get to talk with Tally Goody. For now, signing off, I am JR Nasari, and I hope that you find a way to exercise confidence every day.